COC.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Katrina, and I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation, which will be understanding time use in children from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So as an overview, you might be wondering, what is time use? What did you just say? So we will go into detail about that. Then I'll go into my first study, which will be a systematic review, looking at benefits of multiple movement behaviors. My second study, looking at differences in time use behaviors and going into different disparities in children across different socioeconomic backgrounds and factors influencing those. My third study, which will be associations in childhood time use and upward social mobility, and I will explain what all of that means during the presentation. So first, what is time use? So we do know that a day is split up into 24 hours, and you only have that time allotment to balance activities within that day. So the time use perspective can be used with a lot of different disciplines, such as maybe from an economical standpoint, you might wonder, oh, how many days am I working paid, unpaid, in self-care, things of that sort. But I'm particularly interested in how a day is made up of different movement behaviors. So different movement behaviors include physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleeping. So in 24 hours, you're doing one of those things all of the time. As far as physical activity is concerned, you can split your day up into light physical activity, like now, just standing here, or moderate to vigorous physical activity if you're doing more exercise. So I'm going to go into what each of those movement behaviors are individually and what the importance of them are. So first we do have physical activity. And as my title suggests, I am interested in physical activity in children because it is at an early age when these health behaviors do become a habit. So I think it's a good idea to start these movement behaviors early. And it does help your physical health, such as decreasing risk of developing obesity or diabetes, things of that sort. It also helps your mental health, such as decreasing risk of anxiety and depression. And for children, it also helps with academic performance because physical activity is associated with more on-task behavior in the classroom. For sedentary behavior is any activity where you're more in a resting state, and there are several different forms of sedentary behavior. They're not all bad, which sometimes when you're in the exercise field, it sounds bad, sedentary behavior. But there are a lot of good things. For one thing, we simply just cannot move all the time. And then there are benefits, such as if you're reading, it can improve your cognition and you gain different knowledge, or if you're in a music class or something, you're developing a skill. But there are some negative effects as well. One of concern is screen time, where screen time in excess has been associated with with an increased risk of developing obesity, and for children in particular, it can decrease cognition and increase aggressive behaviors as well. It's also associated with a higher caloric intake, so if you are participating in a lot of screen time, you may be eating more food, and they're typically, again, high caloric, like cookies, or maybe not your most healthy options. Sleep is also important because it does have health benefits as well, and it is associated with daytime sleepiness in a lot of children, and children that have reported decreased amount of sleep and their daytime sleepiness have had an effect on their academic performance because it's hard for them to pay attention in class, and it decreases their motivation to participate in their classes as well. So time use has been more of a direction that the health field is going in, and even in Australia right now, the recommendations for health behaviors in children do use all three of these constructs. So for physical activity recommendations, there is an amount of moderate to vigorous activity children need to participate in, light physical activity, and strength. Sedentary behavior, there is a recommendation for how much screen time you should participate in, and breaking up prolonged sitting, and how much sleep children should be getting as well. So you can see that the public health recommendations are already going in this direction, so more research should be developed to improve those recommendations. So, to look at this from a more visual perspective, I have broken these up in little pie charts. So right here we have the well-rounder. So this is someone who on the surface meets basically all the health recommendations. They get their hour of physical activity, a sufficient amount of sleep, and they have their sedentary behavior not in excess. So time use could be important because there are different profiles that could be debated on whether they are healthy or not. For example, we have the active couch potato. So this might be someone, if you look at their moderate to vigorous physical activity, is actually very high, but then their sedentary behavior is also very high, and their light physical activity is very low. So maybe this person will go to the gym, work out really, really hard, and then go sit down on the couch all day long. So some people might think it's good, some people might think it's bad. Up for debate. Another profile could be the walker. So this, if you look at this person, they are very light physically active. Maybe they walk everywhere. They'll get a little bit of vigorous physical activity, maybe from going up a flight of stairs or something. They get sufficient sleep. Their sedentary behavior is good. So is this good? Is this bad? No. If we look at them all together, these are questions that can be answered better. So what about in children? Because this is what my focus is on. So there has been a time use study done by Olds and colleagues, and they used time use diaries. So this is a method of measurement in time use that is really important because it does go into specificity of what these behaviors are. So you know exactly what kind of physical activity they are participating in, or maybe what kind of sedentary behavior they're doing. So they did a study in children comparing school days versus holiday days. And what they found is during holiday days that children decreased their sitting time, which is good because you want people to be more active. But they also decreased their vigorous activity, probably because they weren't at recess or had classes. They also found, again with the specificity, that although their sitting time decreased, their screen time increased. So you might think, oh, is this good, is this bad? They found that it was unfortunately negative. So even though one aspect improved, it was at the expense of another, and overall had a negative outcome of having an estimated increase of about 650 grams of body fat, in a 6-week time frame. So again, it's very important that this balance of movement behaviors is looked at. So that leads me to my first study, which would be the health and learning outcomes from different combinations of movement behaviors in children. So I would like to systematically review the evidence, exploring these health and learning benefits of children participating in multiple movement behaviors. When I say multiple movements, I don't want to look at a single behavior at one time, not just physical activity or just screen time, but at least 2. So when I'm doing my search strategy, these will be my concepts at physical activity, sedentary behaviors, sleep, movement behaviors, and children. I'm not looking at just these or just this because time use in the public health field is fairly new, so there may not be that much research available on just movement behaviors yet, so I do want to look at different combinations to see what is out there in the literature. So they will need to be published in English, and as I said, must analyze the outcomes of 2 or more movement behaviors, 3 hopefully, but I will take everything that's available. And the participants must be between 5 to 17 years old, because this is what the recommendations are for, is in this age range. So I will go through the text screening to find relevant articles, do data extraction through what kind of movement behaviors were analyzed, what outcomes were looked at, and what forms of measurements were used, do a risk of bias assessment, and at the end, analyze all the data. So you might wonder, why is this important? So we did say that all of these individual behaviors have their own health implications, but maybe putting them together, there's a possibility to improve these public health recommendations for children in the future, which is always ideal. This is a general timeline of what I want to do. I will actually be meeting with the librarian tomorrow to start my systematic review, and hopefully we'll be writing it up by July, August, and I will aim to publish in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. All right, so now we're going to kind of shift gears into my second study. So first we'll look into different disparities in child movement behaviors and socioeconomic status. So socioeconomic status, as a quick note, children cannot have their own socioeconomic status because they just simply don't have a job yet. That'd be very impressive if there's a little 6-year-old at work. But that's not the case. So they do take on their parents' socioeconomic status, and that can be measured in several different ways. So one is educational attainment, income, or jobs. These are the main ones that are looked at, but there are quite a few different measurements that can be used for socioeconomic status. And this is of interest because there are a lot of disparities debating who has healthier behavior. So in general, it's been found that children from a lower socioeconomic status participate in less physical activity, they have more screen time, and they don't have as good or as long sleep as those from a higher socioeconomic status. So since there are those disparities, I do think that's something that should be looked at. And although that is a general consensus, the literature shows that there is some contradiction with that, and even in what type of behaviors they're in. So what kind of physical activity or what kind of sedentary behavior. And I'll go into that in just a second. So for my second study, I'd like to go into understanding time use trajectories of children from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So quickly, I just want to take a look at this graph because it breaks up the time use from what we've been talking about. The physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep. And if you look, for higher SES, they do participate in sports more often, but children from a lower socioeconomic status participate in more unstructured physical activity and active transport, such as walking or biking to school. So there are differences there. And then with sedentary behavior, there is increased screen time in children from lower socioeconomic status, but then children from higher socioeconomic status participate in more extracurricular activities, such as maybe music or lessons. And then there's also increased transport to get to those activities. So this is where those contradictions come in, that people are not exactly sure what the difference is. So I'd like to find that using this perspective. Now, this figure shows factors that influence an unhealthy time use that are typically found in low socioeconomic backgrounds. Not to say that they can't be found in higher socioeconomic backgrounds or they're relevant to all low SES, but these are generally in that population. But for example, they may live in an urban environment which has an increased crime rate. So parents might not want to encourage their children to go outside and play for safety reasons. School environment, there may be less safe play spaces. There's been reported like broken beer bottles on playgrounds, and maybe their play equipment hasn't been updated as much. From a home environment, there are a lot more electronic devices found in childhood bedrooms from lower socioeconomic status, so that can help encourage screen time and not going outside to play. And there are less supportive parenting styles, so maybe they don't have someone saying, oh, go outside, play, do a sport. And from a personal aspect, there is a decreased autonomy in children from lower socioeconomic backgrounds from the way they're brought up and their expectations. So these are things that could potentially influence an unhealthy time use in that population. So, for my study, I would like to use the longitudinal study of Australian children, or LSAC, to evaluate differences in time use trajectories of children from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and to identify predictors of healthy time use in children from a lower SES background. So this little timeline down here, for those that are not familiar with LSAC, it is a longitudinal study, and I could obtain time use diaries starting in 2003, where they had two different cohorts of children. One were aged 0 to 1, and the second was aged 0 to 4. And they collected time use diaries every 2 years through 2009, when cohort 1 reached 6 to 7 years old, and cohort 2 was between 10 and 11. So it would be very interesting to look at that. So my procedure would be to look at the combination of these trajectories using the time use diaries from the different socioeconomic backgrounds to see what these differences are. And secondly, I would like to identify locations, school characteristics, and home environments that lead to a healthy time use trajectory in children from a low socioeconomic background, because some of them are successful. So if we look at things particular for that population, we could potentially find ways to improve it in those that do not have healthy time use. So why is this important? Again, there is a really big disparity between the population's movement behaviors, so everyone should have the opportunity to have a healthy lifestyle. And we may find some things that we didn't think about that can be more suitable for a low socioeconomic population that we hadn't thought of before. And again, here's my general timeline. So after my systematic review, I'd like to request the data in August of next year, and hopefully submit to a journal by January of 2021, the International Journal of Epidemiology. And And then the last study is the association between healthy childhood time use and upward social mobility. That is an mouthful, so I'll also explain that. So first off, what is social mobility? So social mobility is any kind of change in a social position. So it's measured a lot like socioeconomic status could be, such as educational attainment, income, or jobs. So I almost said job occupation, that's very redundant. So, or your jobs. So for example, if someone has a job and then received a promotion, they would be experiencing upward social mobility because they've increased their social position. And this can go in both directions as well. I'm particularly increased in upward social mobility because we are dealing with a low socioeconomic population, and as we just discussed, higher socioeconomic populations tend to have healthier movement behaviors, so if we increase that, hopefully their health will increase as well. And also social mobility can be measured from childhood to adulthood, which is what I would like to do. So one example of a way that can be done, let's say with educational attainment, this is just one example. If one's parent graduated with a high school diploma, but then their child graduated with a college degree, they have to experience upward social mobility. So as an example of what that means. So this is kind of my theory behind it, is that if children participate in a healthy time use, which we know is going to be increased physical activity, limited sedentary behavior, and sufficient sleep, it's kind of a recap of the movement behaviors, they will have better health, improved cognition, decreased daytime sleepiness, which could lead to a lot of positive things, such as, well, if they have better health, they can go to class more often, they can pay attention in class more often, so it could increase their academic performance, among other things, because they are more involved in their environment, which can hopefully lead to an upward social mobility. So, how am I going to find this? So there are a lot of data sets that I'm currently looking at. I haven't chosen a single one yet, but I'm looking at a lot of longitudinal studies, including the RAIN study in Western Australia, the Compass study in Canada, and Haynes in the US, AdHealth in the US, or growing up in Scotland, and I'll just kind of give you a little background on the RAIN study, just so you have an idea of what the data sets look like. So the RAIN study is interesting because it has more than 30 years of data. So I can actually look at children, if I wanted to, from birth through adolescence, track their time use trajectories, their academic performance, and then into adulthood. Right now they have data up through their 20s, so I can look at their educational attainment, any jobs, or anything that they've changed or gained since then. And these studies also have extensive research, such as interviews and surveys, looking at their different environments that may influence their lifestyle. So I would like to analyze these behavior trajectories from children from low SES into adulthood, like I just said, so through childhood, adolescence, and so on. And I'd like to compare those trajectories with their academic performance in adolescence, depending on the data set, their highest educational attainment, occupation, and income, and then to finally identify potential mediators from childhood or adolescence that lead to positive trajectories in movement behaviors and social mobility outcomes. So again, why is this important? Because again, we said upward social mobility can, you're increasing your social position and hopefully increasing your health as well in this population. So it's an important thing to look at. I'd like to start researching the data sets and make a final decision on which one I'd like to use in December of next year and submit to a journal by October 2021 in Child Development. So as a summary, we'll do a systematic review to kind of figure out, okay, so what are the health and learning benefits of studying these multiple movement behaviors? Is there an additional benefit to doing this? Is there a difference between movement behaviors in different socioeconomic backgrounds? And what mechanisms can lead to a healthy time use for children from a low socioeconomic background? And what are some positive long-term outcomes? Like, why are we going to do this? And what does it have for those children's future? So thank you very much. If you have any questions.
is the social mobility study is the prediction that that if you change your socioeconomic status, that you're going to change your behaviors that go along with the your new SES group, or is it that you're going to keep the old behaviors that you learned when you were in the old SES group?
It's kind of the other way around. More like a healthy, if you were already in a healthy time use, like you can help, you're matching what that that group that you're aiming for is. So if a child's in a child's in a lower socioeconomic status and has a healthier time use, that's more characteristic of a higher socioeconomic status movement behaviors. So hopefully they will increase and aim toward that.
So you're saying that you think that the physical activity is going to predict the socioeconomic status?
Potentially, like hopefully it could be a pathway that leads to that, and that's what I would like to see if there's any association.
Okay. But obviously you'll be looking at cross-paths in both directions.
Yeah.
What would be the reason for that? Why would physical activity lead to that improved socioeconomic status for those kinds of kids?
Right, because they, if they do have like better physical activity and sleep, that is more predictive of healthier like outcomes. So if you're healthier, maybe you can go to school more often, and if you're at school more often, you'll get better grades. If you have better grades, I mean that's just one thing that we can look at. But I mean developing social skills, being at school, and all those sorts of things.
Might be indicative of the parent's behaviour. If your parent, just because you're poor doesn't mean that you don't want to strive for more. Forcing your children to be more active, to be more whatever the profile is of a wealthier child.
Supporting them to be more active.
That's it.
So of course,
Yeah. We don't support, we enforce. But like, by you wanting your child to strive for more, you are in turn wanting yourself to strive for more. And so it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Good idea. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.